Wright House, the Fallingwater. And he's also curator of the exhibition, which we're opening today, Frank Lloyd Wright's Samara, A Mid-Century Dream Home, traveled by Exhibits USA. This lecture, in conjunction with the exhibit, is co-presented by the Sheldon Art Galleries and the Frank Lloyd Wright Krause House in Ebsworth Park, an original Usonian gem designed by Wright in the early 1950s, which is located in Kirkwood. And I'm sure many of you know it, but if you don't, I urge you to pay a visit. It's a spectacular house, and we should be very proud to have it here in St. Louis. I want to thank Alison and John Faring and Nancy and Kenneth Kranzberg, who made the exhibition possible here in St. Louis, with the additional support of Christner Inc. and Jeremy Hinton, AIA. The lecture by Scott Perkins is made possible by Joan and Mitchell Marco. Thank you so much. The touring exhibition is a program of Exhibits USA, a national division of the Mid-America Arts Alliance, with the Missouri Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. I want to thank Kay Dusenberry, Chairman of the Board of the Krause House, Joanne Cohn, Emeritus Chairman of the Board of the Krause House, and Lydia Nunes, Associate Director, for all of their help in helping us to collaborate on this wonderful talk. We are so pleased to co-present the lecture and also add to the exhibit a small feature on the house, which St. Louis is fortunate to have. After the lecture, please join us for a reception in the Kemper Atrium just across the walkway. The galleries will be opened until 2 p.m. Now, I would like to introduce Kay Dusenberry, Chairman of the Krause House in Ebsworth Park, who will introduce our speaker. Kay?
Before I introduce Scott, I would like to thank Olivia and the staff at the Sheldon for the great job that they've done in putting together the exhibition and the lecture and the reception. Could we have a round of applause for all the hard work and skill that went into setting this up? Thank you. I'd also like to invite you to visit the Frank Lloyd Wright House in Ebsworth Park, also known as the Krause House. It's been beautifully restored. It's open to the public. You can take a tour by appointment. And there is a small display about our house that's part of the Samara exhibit. It's right at the conclusion of the Samara exhibit. And if you're interested, we have flyers that you can pick up if you're interested in taking a tour. Or you can always go to our website, www.ebsworthpark.org. And I have to put in a little plug for our book. We've just completed a new book about the house, and we're very excited to share it with the community. If you're interested in the book, there are a few copies at the Sheldon's gift shop, and also there's lots of information on our website about how you can pick up a copy. So, with that, I would like to introduce Scott. We're very fortunate to have him here today as curator of the Samara exhibition. Scott has a bachelor's degree in interior architecture from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. He also holds 2 master's degrees from the Bard Graduate Center for Studies in the Decorative Arts, Design, and Culture, which is in New York City. He is currently completing work on his PhD at the Bard Graduate Center, and his PhD is in design history. His dissertation will be on the life and work of Eugene Masselink, who was an apprentice of Frank Lloyd Wright and Wright's longtime secretary. We've already mentioned that Scott serves as Director of Preservation at Fallingwater. Prior to that, he was curator of collections and exhibitions at Price Tower Arts Center in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which is housed in Frank Lloyd Wright's only realized skyscraper. Scott has also curated other exhibitions, including Wright Restored, Frank Lloyd Wright's Price Tower Interiors. Scott is a writer. He's written essays on topics such as the interiors and furnishings of Price Tower and the Guggenheim Museum. He wrote a book, Building Bartlesville, 1945 to 2000, that explored the post-World War II architectural impact of Frank Lloyd Wright, Bruce Goff, and William Wesley Peters on the Bartlesville community. Scott has been a guest editor and a contributor to Save Wright, which is the magazine of the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy, and he currently serves on the board of the Conservancy. He is a native of Wausau, Wisconsin, and I believe he said he was a Green Bay Packers fan. Please join me in welcoming Scott Perkins.
Well, Packers fan by default. Thank you, Kay. Wonderful introduction. And I want to add my own appreciation to those people that Kay and Olivia thanked earlier. This exhibition continues to draw large audiences like this and to the attention of Frank Lloyd Wright, who's got a special place in my heart. And I've had the pleasure of working with the folks at Samara now for about 6 or 7 years in various capacities. And the exhibition that's opening here today, though originally designed for one exhibition at one museum, has gone on a national tour with Exhibits USA at a Mid-America Arts Alliance since 2012. So this is actually the 11th venue of 12 on that tour. As if developing an exhibition on the history of this house, Samara, and the family that lived there was not enough, 20 years after its addition to the National Register of Historic Places at a young age of 36, which is unusual, most of those National Register sites are not added until they're 50, Dr. John Christian sought to see Samara designated as a National Historic Landmark. And following nearly 3 years of research, mostly coming out of the research of this exhibition, and our successful defense of its application last year, the U.S. Department of the Interior inscribed the John E. and Catherine E. Christian House as a National Historic Landmark just this past April, making it only the 27th Wright building of some 400-plus extant structures to be named so. It joins Wright's home and studio in Oak Park, Illinois, the Dana Thomas House in Springfield, Illinois, the Roby House in Chicago, Taliesin and Taliesin West, Fallingwater, the S.C. Johnson Complex, and the Guggenheim Museum, on a larger list of 2,500 national landmarks that includes the Statue of Liberty, the Alamo, the Grand Canyon, and Monticello. Good company. And sadly, though, Dr. Christian died this past July on what was his 98th birthday. And I, for one, cannot express fully the great pleasure I had in knowing him and working with him, or being able to, as a researcher and curator, simply to ask him or relay to him a question about his house, his work with Wright, who that person is in this photograph, or simply hearing the words of what it was like to live in his dream house. He relished in greeting groups of visitors before they toured Samara, and surely we would not have had the opportunity to see this exhibition through without his dedication to Samara's preservation and care, or those many recollections, some of which you'll hear in his own voice in the exhibition, as we included excerpts from an oral history taken a couple of years ago. So, we'll begin this morning almost at Wright's beginning. This is Frank Lloyd Wright at age 2. And I always think this picture is really great and kind of full of, I guess, foreshadowing in that he's propped up there facing nature. and really kind of trying to escape this Victorianism of damask tablecloths and braided fringe, and kind of put up against what was sort of happening in the day. I use this photo a lot to kind of place him in context, as he's born 2 years after the end of the American Civil War, and he dies 2 years after the launch of Sputnik. So a huge life. And within those 92 years of life, he carved out a career that was over 7 decades long, seeing nearly 1,100 designs produced in his studio, and 532 of them, 532 of them realized. His architecture is found in 3 countries, in the United States, in Japan, and Canada, and in 37 states, including 5 projects here in Missouri and 2 in the St. Louis area. With all of that architecture still around at the time of his death, and some 20 books by him on his life and work, Frank Lloyd Wright, in essence, was the originator of his own legacy. And it's going to be 57 years this fall since his passing, and 2017 will be his 150th birthday, so we've got some anniversary to celebrate. Where am I supposed to aim this? To you? Okay. Trying. Yeah. All right. Among the first to acknowledge Wright's contributions to American architectural history were the popular and trade publications, as well as the critics that wrote for them. House Beautiful issues 2 special Wright Themes editions within 1 year of his passing, this one highlighting his contributions to the beauty of American life. You'll see this in the show. And the American Institute of Architects, essentially Wright's peers, drafted a list of 17 buildings by Wright they felt warrant protecting for future generations. But more recently, we've seen retrospective exhibitions of his work at the Guggenheim in 2009 that continued on to the Milwaukee Art Museum and the Phoenix Art Museum. We see the Bachman-Wilson House, which is a project from New Jersey that was purchased by the Crystal Bridges Museum and dismantled and moved to Northwest Arkansas, just opened in November to the public. So there's a Usonian kit, all taken apart, to be reassembled. We saw the saving of the David and Gladys Wright House in Phoenix. This was a house that was threatened with demolition by its previous owner. And we saw the reopening of the Hollyhock House in Los Angeles after almost a 4-year restoration. One would think that a public site, a Frank Lloyd Wright House included, that was closed for 4 years would see an audience that was losing interest in it. And they decided on Valentine's weekend in February, just this past February, to remain open for 24 hours and see who came in. And they had 7,000 visitors lined up. So still relevant, still relevant. No, I'm going backwards. There we go. And then we had the public sites, and this is the picture of the Krause House. There are approximately 40, maybe 45 Frank Lloyd Wright buildings open to the public. 13 of them are overnights, so those are the bed and breakfasts or the places like the Price Tower that have hotel rooms, or the Park Inn in Mason City. So you're able to now sort of live in them as well as visit them on a tour. And then we have the merchandise. That was the punchline. 1,188 pieces. Yes, so Wright becomes now a household name. And then most recently, we saw 10 Frank Lloyd Wright structures nominated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites this past January. So we'll hear more about that as that progresses this summer. So all of this really to honor one architect. I'm going to, all right, yes. It can be a bit overwhelming. Let's go back to a simpler time. one where Wright himself is thinking about things, important things, like ways in which architecture can change the way Americans live and work and dream. In the early 1930s, following a decline in his architectural practice during the Great Depression, Wright reemerged as an even more prolific architect, thanks to the publication of his autobiography in 1932, a tool that helped attract promising architecture students to his Taliesin Fellowship, which he established in Spring Green, Wisconsin, also in 1932. Fellowship apprentices worked alongside Wright in the drafting studio at Taliesin, as well as tended to the farmstead, house chores, and music and social events that were part of the communal living experience there. In 1937, they began building a winter campus, Taliesin West, in Scottsdale, Arizona, and both Taliesins continue as important tourist destinations, as well as the home of the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture. And there you see one of the students working on Broadacre City model. The tide begins to shift in the sort of early 30s, mid-30s for Wright. In addition to seeing increased interest by clients, the apprentices start working on a large-scale model, about 12 feet square, called Broadacre City, which was Wright's utopian project he felt symbolized the return of man to a more natural environment, one removed from the overpopulated urban fabric. At the forefront of Broadacre City was a freestanding single-family home on a spacious 1-acre lot. This is what Wright termed the Usonian house, a moderately priced, practical dwelling intended to harmonize with its site. You see a detail of the model. Usonia was an acronym for the United States of North America. And Usonian homes referred to the lifestyle which embodied American ideals of free and simple living, in touch with nature for average middle-class families. This architecture we call organic is an architecture upon which true American society will eventually be based if we survive at all, Wright wrote. An architecture and upon and within which the common man is given freedom to realize his potential as an individual, himself unique, creative, and free. Most of Wright's residential work from 1936 until his death in 1959 was Usonian in character, and the first Usonian home he designed was for Herbert and Catherine Jacobs in Madison, Wisconsin. This is known as Jacobs 1 now. The Jacobs house had the trademarks of Usonian style and ways of building, modular design, the close relationship to the surrounding landscape, scored pigmented concrete floor slabs, a carport, banks of windows opening to the exterior, interior walls of veneered plywood construction, flat roof, and exterior walls of horizontal bands of brick. These characteristics remained fairly consistent in all of Wright's subsequent Usonian designs. You see a photo there of the interior. Wright saw houses, and his in particular, as works of art, proclaiming, quote, "Every house worth considering as a work of art must have a grammar of its own. Grammar, in this sense, means the same thing as any construction, whether it be of words or of stone or of wood. Everything has a related articulation in relation to the whole, and all belongs together, looks well together, because all together are speaking the same language. If one part of your house spoke Choctaw, another French, another English, and another some sort of gibberish, you would have what you have now, not a very beautiful result. You must be consistently grammatical for it to be understood as a work of art." And clients like John and Catherine Christian took these words to heart. But what were they up against? In his autobiography, Wright broadly listed those, quote, "unnecessary complications of construction," of a, quote, "modest dwelling for our time to eliminate." Those are gabled roofs, garages, basements, interior trim, radiators, light fixtures, furniture, pictures, bric-a-brac, painted surfaces, plastering, gutters, and downspouts. Essentially everything you see on this slide. And I also put a slide in of a Lustron house, because while the Usonian houses are very modular, so is a Lustron house, obviously not very organic in the right sense, and I just love the photograph of somebody hosing down the side of their aluminum house. The Christians first contacted Frank Lloyd Wright in early 1950, and after a meeting with him at Taliesin, the architect agreed to design a home to satisfy their needs. It would not be until late 1953, a year after the birth of their daughter Linda, that the Christians again met with Wright to discuss the house, presenting him with a topographical map of their site and photographs of the property. Mrs. Christian, who worked as a social coordinator at Purdue University, referred often to the 1950 edition of Plan Your House to Suit Yourself when considering her family's needs for a dream home. After completing the book's questionnaires about her needs for each room of the house, she typed a 28-page program entitled What We Need for How We Live and sent it to her architect, which I'm sure he appreciated. The document, a copy of which we included in the exhibition, was the guiding tool for Wright and included photographs and biographies of the family members, a room-by-room description of their furnishing and storage wishes, a photographic inventory of the property's existing trees, and basic climate information for the area. While it became clear the Christians had researched and visited other Usonian homes, they still had rather conventional requirements. They did want a basement. They wanted a service entrance and a family room separate from the living and dining area. They concluded, we want a home and its surroundings to have a future, one that will grow with us. And these are just in the correspondence in the Samara archive lists some of the houses that they visited. Dr. Christian was a chemist at Purdue University, and so traveled a lot for conferences, and he and Mrs. Christian would kind of just do what we do, drive past and look at Frank Lloyd Wright houses. So I just put together a list, I think there's 6 here, of the various Usonian houses that they visited. And of course, then they're also getting the publications that these houses are featured in. So House and Home. The Christians purchased land from the Purdue University Research Foundation for their home in 1948, the same year they were married. The triangular lot, part of the Woodland Heights addition to the city of West Lafayette, was just over an acre in size and featured a downward slope of 14 feet at its most extreme points. The lot's location at the end of a cul-de-sac was beneficial to its design, providing an unencumbered view onto the landscaped ravine from what would be the home's living room, bedrooms, and terrace. And you see here just an aerial, this is a Google Earth photograph of the site showing the house outlined. And if you were driving there, this is sort of the cul-de-sac and the drive up to the house, to the carport here. And then I've included, these are also in the exhibit, some photos of the lot before they started working. So this is the raw space, 1951, photos by Dr. Christian, and then one in color from the early 1950s. And then the page from What We Need for How We Live, which itemizes all of the trees on the property. Frank Lloyd Wright formally received the commission in October 1950, but it would be 3 years before he was able to complete an initial floor plan and perspective rendering. In February 1954, and following a redesign of the plan to relocate the bedrooms away from the street, the couple received their final plans from him during a visit to his winter home, Taliesin West, on New Year's Day, 1955. Construction began that April and was supervised by Frank Woods, who was a local builder, and took approximately 18 months to construct. So there's our presentation rendering, Wright's signature, little chop mark there, the red square on the bottom of the drawing. And the first version of the floor plan, you can see here the cul-de-sac at the end of Woodland, the drive up. And then the revised plan, which essentially spins at almost, what we think, 90 degrees. This is the drive up now, around, and then underneath the carport. Wright was also keen to provide the Christians with a landscape plan to surround the home and specify the location of over 70 species of flowering plants, shrubs, and ornamental trees to accompany the 35 evergreen, ash, elm, oak, walnut, and sycamore trees that Dr. Christian inventoried on the property. This is just a plan here. We've got copies of the drawings in the exhibition so you can get a much closer look at them. It's a little bit easier to see the architecture of the house in this. The black areas are where the masonry walls are, and the sort of gray or lined areas are glass. So there's lots of transparency, lots of natural light. And then notes here on the plantings, and then you see the various trees with names of the species next to them. The general plan showed more clearly the defined 4-foot by 4-foot incised grid on the concrete floors, which served to locate all of the interior walls and doors and windows. So this is the way that these houses were constructed. The grid was essentially, scored into the concrete, and the contractors could just measure over 4, 4, 4, 4, put a wall down, 4, 4, 4, 4, put a wall down. And in this drawing in particular, he continues that grid outside onto a lanai, which is actually grass now, and then outside to the front of the entrance here to sort of continue down the sidewalk. So that idea of moving from interior to exterior was part of the Usonian aesthetic as well. And then just a series of elevation drawings. So you can see the exterior in elevation form, lots of cantilevers, lots of horizontal emphasis, very low to the ground. And then I made a detail here of just one of those elevations so you can see how that 4-foot grid actually extends vertically, and you start seeing where it creates areas for the placement of doors and windows. During the construction process, the Christians corresponded with Wright on a variety of topics. The orientation of the house to avoid noise from nearby traffic, like we saw, the location of their built-in furniture, the color of fabrics, and even the length of the living room. Though Wright wasn't able to visit Samara's building site, quite understandable considering his workload, he did enable Edward Kipta to act for him and supervise the construction team. And Kipta was part of the fellowship from 1954 to 1956 as an apprentice at Taliesin. And he's shown in some of the home movies that you'll see in the exhibition, taken during construction. But he also helped with details of kind of figuring out the problems of the masonry, some of the furniture details, and on a couple of cases lectured on Wright's behalf to students at Purdue University. So a construction photo here looking up from Woodland, and another photo, I guess this is at the top of the ravine, looking towards the entrance door. And there's Ed Kipta laying brick. And the construction crew putting the roof on over the terrace there in the living room. And Catherine and Linda visiting the house during construction. It's a great photograph. Standing at what would be their front door. And then the house, when completed, looking up from the ravine. And notice the thinness of the landscape and the trees there. I'll show you some photos of it now. Working from Wright's drawings, the construction team first laid the concrete floor slab, then raised its exterior and interior brick walls and the fireplace. The house's flat roof was finished with coal tar and gravel, engineered so that water would drain from it at each corner. Panels of full-height glass in the entry, living room, and dining room brought in natural light and integrated the interior and the exterior spaces. Philippine mahogany, a favored wood species for Wright during this time, framed the windows and was used for the interior doors, cabinetry, furniture, and all of the wall paneling. So the idea of a home to grow with us was common for most of this post-World War II kind of idea of living in the suburbs. And for most couples who are building their first dwelling, it played into the notion of what a dream home would be and would have, which is essentially everything you could ever need. Like many, the Christians had limited resources, but wished to tailor their home to accommodate many types of functions, from small family dinners to holiday parties to buffet dinners for up to 50 of Dr. Christian's university colleagues. Wright worked with them to ensure their happiness, providing them with the most modern of appliances, as well as furniture and fabrics from his own licensed lines. And I just put a couple of slides in. These are pieces that are in the exhibit, so you can again take a closer look at them. Wright started licensing products in the early and mid-1950s, so he's kind of doing the Martha Stewart thing. He's adding his name, creating collections. This is a series of paint colors for Martin Senauer. Pittsburgh Paint, incidentally, just worked on a paint palette with Tellius and West and Fallingwater, so you can actually go to a PPG paint store and find Cherokee Red, if anybody's looking for Cherokee Red. And then Schumacher was another company. This was a very long-standing relationship, and it ended, I think, in the mid-90s. But Wright designed a line of fabrics, mostly prints, and wallpapers that coordinated with each other in a variety of color schemes. And we have a couple pages in the exhibition. This is one page of that book that shows you the fabrics, just sort of sample strips. And then next to it, he's really telling the story of all the projects that he built. So it's a little bit of bragging in with the merchandising. Incidentally, if anybody's been to Price Tower and has seen the restoration on the 19th floor, we had a whole, 90 yards of fabric or something for the draperies. We had to replicate the draperies based on this 1.5-inch wide strip of fabric. So it was all that was left. And then Heritage Henredon was another licensed product, or licensed series of products. Probably not as successful. You can still find pieces of it on eBay. This was a mass-produced furniture line, and you'll see some pieces of this in the exhibit also. These were great products for Wright to hand to his clients and say, you can order anything from this line using this fabric, and it was sort of pre-approved. So the Heritage Henredon folks developed this line with Wright. They created showrooms, which you'll see, with the furniture, and you can see how all those sort of geometric pieces fit together. Look at this in particular. We'll talk about how the Christians kind of adapt the furniture into looking like it's Heritage Henredon. So this is a typical sort of living room setting. The Christians continually impressed upon their architect in letters and in person that their finances were limited, and they would need to complete elements of Samara over time, something Wright understood and even planned for in its design. So they had this agreement that they would complete the house during their lifetime. He kind of acquiesced and said, fine. All but one element, yes, before Dr. Christian passed away, so. Woods, the contractor, and Kipta, the apprentice, saw that the home was constructed so that decorative elements such as the copper roof fascia and the Philippine mahogany clear-story panels could be completed after the family took possession of their home, which they did in September 1956. Samara's architectural elements provided a warm, rich background of earthy materials that inspired its interior design. Some elements, such as the kitchen's plastic laminate countertops and cork flooring and the bedroom carpeting, were added to provide easy maintenance and comfort, yet did not detract from Frank Lloyd Wright's philosophy of organic design. The color schemes were drawn from nature, generally muted, with textures and flat woven textiles preferred over printed patterns, and clear-coated finishes on all the wood pieces to highlight the graining. And I thought I would give you a taste of some of the images. Some of these are in the show, some of them aren't. I think part of the fun of this project and setting up this exhibition was looking at all of these family photographs and film footage. And a lot of them not in such good quality. I mean, they're quickly taken, they're out of focus, they're a little bit blurry, but there's so much information in them. So I'm showing you some of the reject photos that we didn't use in the exhibit just for that reason, but they really show us kind of the progression of the house, and you can see where, when a little bit of money came in, they made a purchase and bought something, or they redid something, or they upholstered and added draperies and things like that. So these are some early interior photos of the house. Let me go back. Looking at, you can see them laying out swatches of fabric, trying to determine what they're going to upholster that banquette seat on. You see this little cluster of tables here, which is sort of the, I don't want to say the poor man's version, but the sort of simpler version of the Heritage Henredon clustered table that we saw earlier. Let's see a little bit, I think you'll see a better image in the next one. There you go. And you see some pieces that were carried over from their former house. So they're like any new homeowner. They're not starting from scratch. They don't have the money to sort of wipe everything off from the past and start over. They're kind of fitting in little things here and there. This is one of the Heritage Henredon dining chairs with the blue fabric. You'll see the 1970 reupholstery work in the exhibition, the sort of bright green. Lamps that are clearly not right. One of these stools that's become a planting box. And a little bit later, you see a little bit more. Some tables are made. These tables here. We have a lot of, the upholstery is done now on the banquette. There's some tossed pillows. We're starting to see a lot more sort of hominess happening. But still some pieces that, kind of reflect the owner's interests or collecting habits. And then a photo looking at the dining room. This is a Heritage Henredon chairs, dining set. And then a little bit later, I wanted to point something out in the last one too. You can see, whoop. Won't let me do it. All right, there we go. So looking at this image, you can see here the clear story windows do not have the perforated boards on them yet. And then they appear like magic. There we go. So you can see that kind of effect that just that one design element has on the interior. And this is the motif that becomes known as the Samara motif. It's that whirling kind of seed, that helicopter seed pod from the pine tree that Wright abstracts and creates as a design motif. So it'll start popping up in different elements in the house as you go through. Kitchen. Whoa. All right, there we go. Kitchen, work area. Master bathroom. Nursery, so this is Linda's room. And then getting into the living room, this is a 1970 photograph, I believe. And you see either that little three-seat piece that we saw earlier has been just reformed, retooled. They took the scallops off the top, or it's a completely new piece. Again, not a right design, but they're trying to work it within the right interior.
With these Usonian houses, did he have to absolutely approve any element that went in, or were they just contacting?
In the beginning, yes. As it went on, there were more and more of them, and then he had the Guggenheim to work on, and the Price Tower, and yeah. So. So the Christians continued their professional and social relationship with Wright and received advice from him until his death in April of 1959. And from then to the present day, Samara and the folks there have benefited from a strong relationship with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation in Scottsdale. In 1974, 15 years after Wright's death, the Christians wished to redecorate their home. and returned to Wright's former apprentices for guidance on fabrics, furniture, and decorative elements for the living room and dining room. And so in this way, Samara is kind of a rare example of Wright's vision spanning over several decades, where they've used now apprentices to help with some of those efforts. There we go. And so this is a tour, I guess, of the house as you'll see it now. The interiors are pretty much the way they were from this 1974 edition. This is the gate with the light pole that greets you at the bottom of the hill. That copper fascia that was added in 1991 by Dr. Christian. You'll see a version of the wood fascia in the exhibition. How the house looks now, much fuller landscape, if you remember that completed construction photo from '56. And then as you come up the hill and around down here, turning in under the carport. And under the carport, then you start seeing these gardens. There's sort of 5 garden spaces that Wright designed for this property, and so it seems every time you turn a corner, there's kind of a new environment to explore. And the Christians and later Dr. Christian started kind of peppering around different decorative objects and sculpture. The Solari bell is sort of a moniker of these mid-century homes. Paolo Solari was one of Wright's apprentices that started his own school just north of Taliesin West in the desert. But this is the entrance here to Samara. You're kind of walking around under the carport, and you have to make another turn, and the door is actually on the I guess, perpendicular side of this wall. So there's still that kind of moment of discovery that you have with the prairie houses, if you've been to the Roby house or some of those, or you feel like you're walking around the building trying to find the front door. It's Wright's idea of if you think of organic houses or organic architecture as maybe a flower, and it's best viewed if you walk around it and look at it from all angles. He really wants you to kind of see these houses rather than go right to the door and know where the door is and not see the other 4 sides of the house. And the entry there, then. You see Dr. Christian in the window there greeting you. The foyer, this is just inside the front door. If you went ahead and to the left, you'd go down a hallway to the private area of the house, the bedrooms. If you turn at the right, you'll end up right at the top of the steps leading down to the living room. So that's where we'll turn first. Now, this was the color scheme that went back, when the Christians went back to Taliesin West. They worked with John de Coven-Hill, who had left the fellowship for a while to be editor of House Beautiful, and Cornelia Brearley, who was just passed away in 2012. She was one of the very, very early apprentices that stayed there and worked on landscape as well as interior design. Now, Mrs. Christian does another document in this 1974 redecoration, and you'll see sort of poster board photos, stories in the exhibition where she took Polaroids standing in the middle of the room of all 4 sides and created a sort of photo panel of each room, and then put swatches of fabric, swatches of drapery, swatches of carpet, a little bit of brick. So she sent that to Taliesin West and told them exactly what she had, and now she wanted to see what they would do with the new interior. So much brighter color scheme. Still dealing with textures mostly and wovens. This is almost sort of a corduroy fabric. You'll see examples of this upholstery in the exhibition as well. Lots more foliage and things in the house. You see those clear story windows still up there. And then looking out opposite to the terrace, the house that appears now. Now, these are not Wright furnishings. These are Prober pieces that were specified by Taliesin West, but they fit in, I think, much better than the sort of curvy pieces that they had before. And then the mix and match aspect of all of this furniture, you can pick it up and move it very easily. You could seat, I think, 50 or 60 people on these steps in addition to the number of people that are sitting on the banquette. So it's a very flexible space. It was great for lectures for Dr. Christian, and it's even better now for tours of Samara. They can really just have people sitting inside the house, which is really the way you want to see a Frank Lloyd Wright house, is at seated height. And then outside the terrace, you can see a little bit of this copper fascia up close. And then a lot of the decorative elements that got added later. These include, of course, furnishings, things like the TV table, but then also the rug, which was added in the early 90s. Based on that Samara motif of sort of the motion or the moving seed, this was designed by an apprentice named Ari George. And we have his beautiful rendering for this on graph paper in the exhibition, too. It's almost life-size to the size of the rug. And then looking up towards the dining room. And the dining chairs were added in the late 80s. These were designs that were part of that package in the 50s, but were one of the last things to sort of get made. They had the Heritage Henredon furniture there in the beginning. They reupholstered it in the 70s, and then I think it was 88, they had the dining set built. And you can see much more Usonian in nature. It just really fits that house, where the Heritage Henredon furniture still had a sort of a taste of the mass-produced. And then this really great inside corner window. Usually you see them going outside, but this one is looking inward. And another view there of the dining table. You see all the little, I always think this is a great place for a purse. Pair of shoes, I don't know, yeah. The food you didn't want to eat, just kind of stuff it in. But yeah, they're very nice. I mean, it's beautiful. It's sculpture. We've got one of these chairs next to a Heritage Henredon chair in the exhibit, so you can really see the difference between the two. Lots of interest in the Christian family with Asian art. So we have an obi here as a table runner. The screens, obviously, there's lots of ceramics and things going on in the house, which really fits into a Wright aesthetic, a Wright interior. And a close-up there again of the chair. And the kitchen and the workspace. So still using the original appliances, except refrigerator or freezer, one of the two. Yeah. But, you know, the laminate countertops are still there. It's a really wonderful kind of woven linen texture that looks nice and organic in the place. And you can see kind of the transition here from the kitchen going through to a utility space and then beyond to the other side of the foyer. Oh, another little detail there of some of the collections. These are pieces from the Imperial Hotel. And this is the hall going down to the guest bedroom. So this is the private wing of the house. Master bathroom, master bedroom, nursery, guest room. And you can really see how this Philippine mahogany paneling just keeps that horizontality, just like the brick does on the outside, keeps your eye going down the hall, but adds so much warmth. And then just the really simple decoration of the wood grain. And there's a nice view. This I really like just as a study of textures for this house. This is the guest bedroom. It's not a room that everybody saw, but it tells you so much about what this house is made of just in this one photograph. So you have brick meeting wood, piano hinges. Wright liked to use those. Why use those little hinges that break up his line? He wants one continuous hinge going up and down. And then another view looking out onto the lanai from the guest bedroom. Some of the furnishings in the house were purchased by Dr. Christian. These are pieces that were produced, I think, in the 80s and 90s. A company called Casina was making them with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. So not designed for Samara, but definitely fit within this idea of an organic interior or a Usonian interior. And when the house became a historic house museum and was being used more as an education facility, these pieces become sort of study tools for students that come in. There's a lot of geometry lessons there. There's a lot of art lessons there. So it's a great way to kind of talk about Wright's entire career by experiencing one house. And then standing there on the garden looking back at the front door. And the shot of the master bathroom. So, Samara is presently administered by the John E. Christian Family Memorial Trust, which was founded in 1990 by Dr. Christian and his daughter to preserve the architectural significance of Samara as an exquisite example of Frank Lloyd Wright's Usonian ideals. The Trust also provides opportunities for volunteer and financial support of the home and its educational programs, including the establishment of an archive and library for scholarly research on Wright's architecture, interiors, and furniture in general, and Samara in particular. And this is just a photo of, this was a working day in the Samara archives. They benefit greatly from a relationship with the West Lafayette Public Library. They have a separate locked archive room. So all of the original correspondence and drawings, pieces of the furniture, books, anything sort of related to Frank Lloyd Wright or to Samara are all there to be used in a research facility. So made for a very easy place to work when you're pulling together an exhibit on the house. So working also in conjunction with Indiana Landmarks, which is based in Indianapolis, the Christian Family Trust also oversees their tour program. And Samara has seen well over 50,000 visitors since they began doing tours there in the 90s. There's one, and there you can see how the room is really used when there's a lot of people in it. And then I'll just leave with one photo here of Dr. Christian and Linda today, relatively recently. So thank you very much. Yeah. Do I take questions? That's They did not get their basement. They got a couple extra closets, right? Yeah.
Ivy covering the walls, is that part of Wright's design, or did they just let the ivy?
That just happened naturally, yeah. The ivy on the walls, yep. Was it natural or was it Wright's? It was natural.
Wright approved of the curtain?
Both versions, right? Yeah, it's the Schumacher fabric. So, yeah, it's sort of a nice kind of off-white with a little bit of metallic in it. So. It's a botanical term, but it's that little seed, you know, those helicopter seeds. You throw them up in the air. We have a wooden version for the kids in the exhibit, so you can sit and play with it and it'll spin around. So it's kind of a frozen, when you look at the motif in the window and in the carpet, it's kind of a frozen snapshot of that. We never got a price from him because he always said it wasn't finished. So it's probably time to start tallying it up. Yeah. I mean, and most of the Wright houses, I don't know if it's a 3-to-1 rule. I always say whatever he told you it would cost, it was usually 3 times more. So, yeah. They didn't get the family room, did they? No, but they did have that nice open space. I mean, Wright she almost wanted, separate living and dining space, and he kept it open, but he separated it by height. So you still had the sense of having a little bit of a lower ceiling in the dining area and making it feel a little bit more private, and then the much larger and taller living space. So. These chairs are Wright's. They were part of the original package, and then produced 88, I think it was 88, yeah. So.
Yeah, I noticed the picture you had of the master bedroom showed that the brick wooded and wood. I was curious, an early photograph of the brick, I was surprised at brilliant white border.
Yeah.
And then in the later one, it's more softer. Did they repoint it or what happened?
Linda's saying not repointed, so just aged over time? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Did the roof leak?
Of course. Did it leak in the center, though, or just the corners? That's the... By the fireplace, so, yeah.
How energy efficient are these houses?
Well, this one still has single pane glass, so quarter-inch glass windows, radiant heat flooring, air conditioning. Linda's nodding. What else are we missing?
The cantilevers help protect it.
Right, yes, so you have a lot of shade there with the cantilevers.
Position so that they take advantage of the solar in the wintertime.
Yep.
But necessarily.
Okay, yep.
It's really excellent. The floor, it's carpet, multiple. These deck doesn't have a textured concrete.
It does. It's scored underneath the carpeting. I don't think it does. I think it just makes it warmer. It's more of a comfort level, or a comfort thing. And the bedrooms, it's a wall-to-wall kind of carpet. That hallway in the living room is kind of cut away, so you still see the concrete around the perimeter of the room. Yep. This side, back there. It's a particular collection, but the company, the Wright line, I think, ran something like 53 to 56. Somebody took the opportunity to scan all of the catalogs, and they have them online somewhere. If you Googled it, you'd find all of the old catalogs. I still see pieces, especially kind of these small side tables on eBay all the time. So, yeah, it's really an interesting line. Yeah. Corner. No. The copper fascia was designed by Wright. It wasn't installed until '91 by Dr. Christian. Paolo Soleri is the maker of that bell. So Soleri has nothing to do with this house other than that piece of art. So 2,200 square feet, including terraces, or just indoor? Just indoor. 86, 85? 86. One more, no, yeah, go ahead.
All of Mrs. Christensen's involvement in the house and planning, why did you know perhaps why he chose in the end to call him John Christensen?
No, they call it John. It's the official name, if you on the National Historic Landmark nomination, is John E. and Catherine E. Christian House. Yes, yeah. Well, that's because, yeah, that's following her death. But yeah. Anyone else?
The House has interior additions without wood stuff.
Wood studs in your sandwich wall? It's the sandwich, right? Yeah. We have a cross-section of the Samara wall in the exhibition, so you can actually see it, and it doesn't have studs in it. It's just the board and batten, and then a sandwich, sort of that, we always say it's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Yeah, no studs.
This is not about Samara, but it's picking up on the notion of the wood. So you are the preservation. Oh, God.
Yes, we leak. We're leaking at this moment.
Moisture is a problem.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what's going on, especially with that little part you walked up to that little bedroom, which when I was there, I had my allergy, and it was just so damp and so molding. Is that under control?
It will be. We're bringing in a restoration specialist this winter to look at it. The thing about Fallingwater is it's a stone building with so many mortar joints that we think we find it, and it's not it. So it's not coming from the roof, it's not coming from the chimney mast, it's coming somewhere else horizontally. So we're bringing somebody in this spring. But yeah, that's a problem, that little door frame. I know which one you're talking about. Anyone else?
So you listed countries where Wright has buildings.
Yes.
Mark Coleman House in Ireland, did you eliminate that because it didn't sense that? Or?
In Ireland.
Yeah, down the country Wicklow, just south of Dublin, Mark Coleman completed, I think, in 2007.
Is it a legacy plan? I'm not counting those. I'm not counting those. Yeah. I'm going with the foundation's list, yeah. Same with the sites in Buffalo that were just recently built too. So, yep.
Why do you think we don't see more modern architecture trying to so much further ahead of its time? This is something that's really common. With the old showing model.
I missed the second half of that. Why?
Why don't we see more of it today? Or why didn't it take off? In the 60s and 50s and 70s, it didn't have any thoughts on Was he just way ahead of his time?
I think he was ahead of his time, and I think he was just kind of odd. I mean, it wasn't, and I mean that because he wasn't, there was a time where he wasn't studied in school. There was a time where he was sort of looked down upon. These were expensive houses, and when you start factoring in, cost-cutting measures, they end up being kind of out there. What I think is interesting now is that the school itself has kind of turned towards sustainability and looking at Wright's principles of using natural materials and light, facing a house and using solar energy and that sort of thing, and pulling back some of his philosophies into sustainability movements. So, yeah. It's the building in Canada. It's a cottage it's right across the Quebec, but it's a little lakeside cottage. I can't think of the name of it. Yes, one more.
The picture of the kitchen, is that similar to the way the kitchen is at the Ebsworth Park house here?
Somebody from Ebsworth would have to answer that. I don't know. The kitchen's similar between Samara and Ebsworth. Ebsworth Krause was 51. Yeah, they're not. The idea of a workspace rather than a kitchen was typical Usonian. I mean, he wanted it to be.
The one I remember at Ebsworth Park was kind of curved, and then there was another little back space.
Yeah. Linda? No, the Canadian one, did we find it?
Oh, yeah, there's three of them. There's the bath pavilion,
Oh, okay.
and then the Pitkin House in
Pitkin's the one I was thinking of.
Ontario, and then there was a Sheldon Art
Okay. So, yeah, 3.
One last.
I didn't hear the first part. Yes. I have the pleasure of having tours come past my office about 4 or 5 times a day, so I always get to hear the questions at the end of the tour. And one of them is always bound to be, is Fallingwater based on the Fountainhead? And our guide has always said, well, the Fountainhead was fiction, and Fallingwater is nonfiction. So it's sort of, Rand was a client. They did do designs together, but nothing ever came out of it. I mean, sure, I think so. Yeah, it's a good story. Yeah. Okay, Olivia. Yes.